Sekhsaria on modern technology and the global climate crisis. I would like to invite Dr. Sekhsaria to come on the dais and take a seat. I would also like to invite Mr. Prashanto Kumar Chattopadhyay, editor of Kalodhoni, to come on the dais and take his seat. We'll felicitate Dr. Sekhsaria with some sweets, tackling an issue of Kalodhoni and the memento. And he will be felicitated by Patralekha Bosu and Chandrani Mukherjee. Thank you, Patralekha and Chandrani. Now, a brief introduction of Dr. Pankaj Sekhsaria. He is a renowned environmentalist and an ardent researcher. He is a writer, photographer, campaigner, and academic. He is Associate Professor, Center for Technology Alternatives for Rural Areas, IIT Bombay. His research interests primarily encompass the relationship among science, society, and technology. He has keen interest in working with the issues of environment and wildlife conservation and worked extensively with a focus on the Andaman and Nicobar Islands. He has authored a number of books and research papers in different national and international journals. Dr. Sekhsaria, please.
Can I request for the slide? And also the lights can be off. सब बंद कर पीछे का भी बंद कर That's okay. Whether the slides, I'll be showing slides. Dada, I'll be showing some slides, so it'll be difficult for you to see. So I suggest, yeah. Yeah. So thank you very much. Good afternoon to everybody. Like I mentioned in the beginning, my deep gratitude to Kalodhoni for inviting me, for putting together this event and for inviting me. I'm deeply honored and it's a great privilege. So we can just go to the first slide.
Sir, if you can just switch on one light at least.
Yeah, actually, I'm probably not supposed to look at it. The slides would be more important, but if you can, if they want, if the audience wants to. I must also say that I have a very special Calcutta connection, that I was born here in Calcutta, many years ago. So it's always been, for a very long time, no credit to me. For a very long time, vacations used to be in Calcutta. I still have a lot of family. So it's always, I haven't come in a long time. I did come, like I mentioned, 3-4 months ago for the release of this book, but there's something special, of course, about the city that you were born. I didn't live here for very long, but every Diwali and every summer vacations used to be. I grew up in Pune, and we are from a Marwari family, so my uncles and my cousins used to have business in Bada Bazaar, and I have some pleasant memories of going and sitting on the gaddi over there, selling cloth and eating samosa and shingara and sandesh. So I wanted to keep the box, but I hope I get it. So what I will do is I will try and narrate a story as I understand of this whole issue of the climate crisis and modern technology. And this is going to be a bit of a hodgepodge. I am not going to try and provide any solutions. It is an effort and it's an articulation of my own grappling as a researcher, now as a professor at IIT Bombay, where technology is at the heart of everything. So it's also not going to be so easy to just say no to technology or to criticize technology. But it is a bunch of things that I have been thinking and trying, and I'm going to try and present that to you. This is certainly not a solution. It's a bunch of many questions that I myself have, that I'm grappling with, that I think a lot of us are grappling with. This is partly an academic presentation, this is partly an activist presentation, and in some senses, in an unexpected way, it will build upon the presentation and the discussion that we just had before tea. So as the title is Modern Technology and the Global Climate Crisis. Next one, sir. When I was exactly a month ago, as we were discussing, I was thinking about this. I was 26th of January, I was in 26th January, I was in Hyderabad at the literature festival there, Hyderabad Literature Festival, and there was a very prominent journalist, very well respected and great research, who was also on the panel. And I think he had just finished a session. He has done a recent book. I have erased his name, although this is in the public domain. It's a tweet, but just to not get into any trouble, hopefully. But it is not meant to create trouble. It's also to use this as a peg to articulate and discuss what we want to discuss. So this is a tweet. If you see at the bottom of the 25th of January, so he writes that of all the big metros I travelled to, Hyderabad seems the most future ready. Yes, it too has its traffic bottlenecks, but at least there is a genuine sense that the city has been preparing its infrastructure for future growth by retaining an old city charm. Credit to NCBN. So all the chief ministers, hopefully the current chief minister will also push the fast forward button with minimal disruption. A certain consistency in governance. Now when I read this tweet, I was still in Hyderabad, and the first question that came to my mind as a reflection is, are we really future ready? And what does it mean to be future ready? And I'm thinking this gentleman, like all of us, had probably flown in from Kerala. He was in the literature festival there. He has come to the modern airport. There has been a certain infrastructure, traffic, smooth movement of traffic. Coming to, some of you know that part of Hyderabad which is known as High-Tech City, which has actually been built on rocks that are millions of years old. Millions of years old. So what does it mean for somebody to have that little experience of a city? And I'm assuming I'm reasonably correct, because this is not a person who lives in the city. He has a minimal experience of that city, like all of us do. So how is it so easy for us to say that we are future ready? And in a context of what the reality of today is. Next one. These are two pictures. And just if you try and look at them, this is the reality of today. And you know what these pictures are? Next one. This is not Gaza. This is California. This is California of January 2025. Thousands of acres of land that just burned down. This is the reality that we face today. In the most powerful, the richest and the most elite part of the world today, they are not able to control what's happening around them. We are not in control of the present. We are not present ready. So how are we future ready? So when we, and I use this quote, this tweet as just a thought process for us and for myself. What is it that we mean when we say we are future ready? What are we accounting for? Are we accounting for, in the context of this country, are we accounting for availability of water, for availability of livelihoods, for availability of food, for availability of clean air? I did a piece, some of you may have read about 2 months ago in the Frontline, where it was a special issue, and we titled the piece, India 2024 is Bhopal 1984 plus plus. Yeah. Because I don't think any one of us is, for example, breathing cleaner air than we did 40 years ago. Every city, every town, this country is certainly poor quality air, and there are many more things to say. So this made me think, and which is what I was looking. Are we even present ready to argue that we are future ready? So when we account or when we make a claim, and when people in power and influence are talking about this, we are of course reflecting from the lenses that we know, from the world that we exist, and this is going to be limited because, as you can see, if this is California and the next one, this incidentally is Gaza. You know, and if I was not to tell you, and if I show a slightly different picture, we won't know which is which. And these are both realities of today. Now, of course, this is one kind of reality, and we're now all discussing and arguing, and with the new Trump administration is concerned, whether it's about a climate change incident and stuff like that. But we have to really rethink what's happening today, and that is where in the context of the current crisis, which is the global climate crisis. But like I said, I don't want to come up and say that this is the problem and this is the solution, because I don't have those answers. What I'm going to propose to you and what I'm going to present to you is, like I said, to try and see how we can engage. How we can engage with these questions in ways that might be new and interesting and challenging and productive. And I'm going the route, and the next one please, is to look at the technology question in the climate crisis. Because there's no doubting the fact that there is a question of technology, and this links up to the discourse on the Anthropocene that many of you are probably aware of, and I will tell you why I'm saying that. And one way, if not to solve the problem, even if not to fully understand the problem, but to partly understand the problem, is going to be the interdisciplinary way, where science and technology is not going to be enough. And I say that as somebody who's done a PhD in the sociology of technology. I have an interest in the environment, and I'm engaged with a whole set of other things. Now, this picture is not linked to the title, but it's a very interesting picture that I will explain to you later if you have the time of why it is there. Next one, please. So the question to ask in some senses is, what is the technology question? Technology broadly defined. What should be the technology question? And what is the way that we can ask the technology question? And the answer, in some senses, I will come to this, the justification for asking these questions is the coming of the Anthropocene. Now, you're probably all aware that we are in the Anthropocene and we are not in the Anthropocene, because the bunch of scientists who have the authority in the scientific world to say that the Earth has moved from a certain era, a geological era, into another geological era, have not agreed that we are in the Anthropocene. So what the Anthropocene indicates, in very simple lay terms, is that the human species, the human dimension has become the most powerful element today, that we are altering Earth systems in a way that Earth systems have not altered the planet before. So we as a species have become equal to all the changes as a source of change, and that's why it's called the Anthropocene, which people have also objected to, because it puts the responsibility on the entire species rather than somebody calling it the Capitalocene or the Plantationocene, which says that it is a function of capital. It's a function of system of organizing of capital and capitalism that has caused this crisis. It is not the entire human species, because we will recognize that there are differentials, the more vulnerable, the poorer, the people with the lesser footprint also then get blamed equally. But if for a moment we accept that human beings are now equal contributors, we have brought about changes to the planet, that earthquakes and all the geological phenomena, Earth systems, have not actually equal to that, which is why we become so powerful. And while we've not agreed on the term Anthropocene, we are facing the climate crisis, which we all know. Next one, please. Now, these are very interesting graphs, if they are probably visible. So this is 2015 work, which shows you some very interesting graphs. These are socioeconomic trends. On the top left is population. You see real GDP, you see urban population on the bottom left, in the middle left, you see large dams, and you see a certain very interesting trend in the way these graphs are going. So from about 17th or 18th century, they are all inching up slowly, and then you see a mark around the 1950s, the 1940s and 1950s, where they all start to actually go vertical on that y-axis. Next one. This is just a zoom in of this. You look at population, starting with the 1750s, you go up to 1950, you look at real GDP. So there is a very interesting coincidence when you look at data retrospectively, that they are all moving, inching up, and 1950s they just skyrocket. So many parameters in the socioeconomic trends. Next one. These are Earth system trends. Similarly, to the indicators we saw above, carbon dioxide, nitrous oxide, on the bottom left, middle, stratospheric ozone, marine fish capture, almost exactly the same trends. Starting with the middle of the 17th and the 18th century, they inch up till about the middle of the 20th century and then they skyrocket. It's almost like these graphs are one on top of the other. Now this is what alerted scientists 15-20 years ago to realize that something is happening, and this period is now called the Great Acceleration. This marks around the 1940s, 1950s, and you know what's very interesting in the Anthropocene discussion? So the logic in the Anthropocene discussion is that if thousands and thousands of years later archaeologists or geologists were to dig up the earth, you will find something in the layers of the planet that will show a certain obvious shift from what the system earlier was. And one of the most interesting things that they are saying in the kind of pop version of Anthropocene, there are 4 elements that you will start to see in the 1940s and 1950s that have never been there in the history of the planet. Or these are markers of the change. One of them is plastic, one of them is nuclear radiation, the third is concrete, and the fourth, interestingly, is chicken bones. So one of the very interesting things that have happened is in the process of modern technology, we have changed the structure of the chicken to such a large extent that you can actually have a different bone structure. And it is the most eaten meat, and there will be fossils and there will be so much deposition of chicken bones that you will make out that it is a chicken, but it is different from a chicken of a slightly earlier age. So you are going to see the mark of new elements of change in the layers of the earth. Now, how this has come to happen is the question of technology. So, one of the most used materials on the planet today, I learned only 2 weeks ago, after water, is concrete. The amount of material that is being used, so that is the most used material. And what I'm trying to point to is that these are all functions of how technology has come to be, or what technology has done. So if the human being is intervening in the systems of the planet, in the systems of the earth, it is a function of the fact that we have these technological tools with us. We have the capacity to develop these technologies. Yes, we might have come to a brink today, but this was not the narrative 50 years ago, even when India became independent, right? Now, so we have to engage with the technology question from that point of view, and to stand up and say, okay, no to technology. I think it's an important thing to do, because the benefits of technology are not uniform. People have suffered across the board, and there's a lot of interesting literature, discourse and discussion in, say, the philosophy of technology, the sociology of technology that asks this question. To say that there is a problem and we have to kind of resist it, let me put it that way. But if we avoid that confrontational method, if we come to it at a slight tangent, what would it look like? And that's what I want to propose. How can we engage with the idea of technology in creative ways, in academic ways, that might open up boxes that do not fall in this yes and no or this binary paradigm? I am not at all saying that there is no problem with technology, but it is probably not very useful to just say no. While we have to say no to some things, we are all technological creatures in that sense. My PhD supervisor talks about all of us being technological cultures, just that our technologies are different. So the human being is very much symbolized by technology and by the way we do things. So go to the next one, please. So these are, I mean, just the carbon dioxide, nitrous oxide. You will see the same trends starting off in the middle 18th. And what this marks, and I mean, coming to the issue, this also in some senses marks the shift in the system from the mercantile capitalism to the industrial capitalism, to the resources, to the accumulation of capital. So this shift that took place, that was mobilized by technology and the industrial revolution, is what we are seeing today. So these historic emissions coming together in the middle 20th century and then skyrocketing is a process that starts with the industrial revolution. So there's no denying the fact that this has caused that kind of thing. And while we recognize that, how do we take a step forward, I think is a very interesting possibility and challenge. Next one, please. So I want to kind of jump to something that I have found very useful. So in the philosophy of technology, I'm going to take 2 examples of how different scholars have looked at the question of technology. In the early part of the 20th century, Lewis Mumford, whom some of you might have heard, I must admit I have not read him very extensively. But in the 1930s, Mumford spoke about the polytechnic and he spoke about the monotechnic. He spoke about the Polytechnic, which enlists many different modes of technology, providing a complex framework to solve human problems. This is a form of engaging with technology and tools, let's put it that way, which are life-oriented, which are not work-oriented or power-centered. He also contrasts the Polytechnic with the Monotechnic. He talks about Monotechnic, which is a technology only for its own sake, which oppresses humanity as it moves along its own trajectory, based on scientific intelligence, quantified production, directed towards economic expansion, military superiority. And the example that he took at that point of time, interestingly, was the automobile. But what's important to keep in mind is the idea that Mumford is talking of quantified production, of control, of having a full understanding. When, on the other hand, let me put it this way, that we don't necessarily know everything. We don't necessarily control. We don't necessarily understand the world that we are part of. And a paradigm of science and technology on which we have built our world, or continuing to build our world, operates on the premise of complete knowledge, understanding, prediction, forecasting, and perhaps control as well. Next one, please. And there's a very interesting contemporary scholar called Sheila Jasanoff. Again, some of you might have heard of her. And I would also like to urge you to not, of course, what they say is very interesting, but not necessarily that we go by what they're saying, but as a means of re-looking at the relationships of society, technology, development, to see if we can create productive ways of engaging with that idea. So what Jasanoff talks about is of the technologies of hubris. These are to reassure the public and to keep the wheels of science and industry turning. Governments have developed a series of predictive methods, risk assessment, cost-benefit analysis, climate modeling that are designed on the whole to facilitate management and control even in areas of high uncertainty. And for me, personally, the clear connection is, say, with an earthquake kind of dimension. I mean, an earthquake is a manifestation of uncertainty. Where, when, how, what scale, we will never know. So how does science and technology operate in that real world where there's so much uncertainty about one particular dimension, for instance? So what she says is that these technologies ignore uncertainty and ambiguity. They focus on the known at the expense of the unknown. And they actually, well-defined short-term risks command more attention than indeterminate long-term ones, especially in cultures given to technological optimism. So this is a point of view, but I think it's a very interesting point of view to unpack what technology is doing, and they also internalize the challenges and the problems that lie outside their purview. So this is, if you look at all how science and technology operates, and I'm sitting in a technology institution, we need to know, we have to quantify, we have to model, we have to predict, and that is premised on a paradigm that claims that we know. And when we all know that there are so many uncertainties, so many ambiguities, so many unknowns. There's the known unknown and there's the unknown unknown. We don't even know. So what we are going to lose, say, example, in the forest of the Great Nicobar are the unknown unknowns. We've not even documented. There is not a full inventory of the species in those forests. So we will of course lose those, but we will also lose those species that we have not even known, and it will never be known. Next one, please. What she also has as a contrast, I think, is a very beautiful formulation, which is the technologies of humility. And I find that, I think, very important for us to engage with the idea of technology. And she talks about methods that try to come to grips with the ragged fringes of human understanding, the unknown, the uncertain, the ambiguous, and the uncontrollable. How do we have a paradigm of technology, of science, of development that accounts for the fact that we don't know? That there is the known unknown, there is the unknown unknown, and what happens when we then plan for something of that kind? So I think it is asking for, and there are some prescriptions in the way that she talks about it. So there is a claim here for a more democratization of technology and technology choices. But why I'm also talking about all of this is to enter that space where science and technology is created, to understand what is happening, and that is a space where I have engaged in for the last decade or so in my academic work, first as a PhD scholar in a field called Science and Technology Studies, which I will come to you in the next one. So what it does, once we start looking at these questions of what's happening inside technology and stuff like that, we can ask questions that we have kind of stopped asking, or we are asking in a particular way, expecting certain kinds of answers. Questions of what is skill, what is drudgery. Because in the paradigm of engineering and technology, one of the primary purposes of innovation and technology development is the removal of drudgery. but what is it targeted at? What is quality? What become the paradigms and the definitions of quality? What is efficiency? Why are we, so it is a paradigm of science and technology and engineering that focuses on efficiency and high efficiency. But high efficiency comes at a cost of something else. When efficiency becomes the only parameter of evaluation, we lose out a lot that actually compromises on efficiency. But why should efficiency be the only parameter that we evaluate? What is relevant? And relevant to whom, for instance? Next one, please. And then, it opens up spaces of engagement, even within the modern kind of capitalistic mode of production, but also within technology and science, of objects and subjects and themes that we don't really question in terms of research. So the question of infrastructure, and this is the whole debate, for example, in the Great Nicobar thing. The question of innovation. Our entire discourse today is around innovation. Radical innovation, this innovation, we're talking innovation parks. But where have we ever discussed repair and maintenance? There's a whole body, whole universe and whole ecosystem of skills and people and resources that ensure that your systems are actually operating. Systems don't operate because they are created. Systems operate because they are maintained and they are repaired. There's constant repair that is happening. But you look at where is the academic work. There's some academic work, but where is it really? I mean, if you just think about the mess that was happening when we set up this whole thing, the people who are not visible, the technicians, people who are backstage, are the ones who are keeping our systems running. The idea of infrastructure is also very interesting. In a very preliminary kind of way, that infrastructure is the best one that is not visible. And infrastructure becomes visible when it breaks down. So by default, people running infrastructure, maintaining infrastructure, people who ensure that the telephone lines are working, that the sewer lines are working, that the railways are working, only become visible when it breaks down. So that's very interesting. So it's underneath, it's meant to be underneath. But unless we pay attention to those people, those skill sets, those cultures that maintain and repair, we are not going to get the full picture. The question of who is the non-user of technology. I did use that concept in my PhD work. We are all talking about use of technology. But people don't use technology for many reasons. They may not be necessarily foolish. Maybe I want to use a technology, but I am the wrong gender. I am the wrong caste. I am the wrong class. I want a smartphone, but I never have the money to buy one. I want to ride a bicycle, but I am in a culture where a woman cannot ride a bicycle. So what this allows us to do is to pay attention to elements of technology, of the infrastructures that otherwise get neglected. And there are interesting possibilities in academic work now, in the sociology of technology, that opens up. So if you have to study a failure of technology, there's so much premium today on success. But what happens to technology that fails? How do I even find a technology that fails? Who is going to tell me that I developed a technology and it failed for me to be able to study them? And what can I learn from that? Leave alone what I can learn for the success, but for the sheer process of going through and doing that entire process of developing the technology that is then, for various reasons, fails. When does a technology fail? Does it fail in the lab? Does it fail in the workshop? Does it fail in industry? Does it fail in the market? Does it fail when communication happens about the technology? So it opens up, and I think when we start opening up these questions in the larger context of technology, which links up to the climate crisis, we might be able to ask questions that otherwise we are not able to ask. Next one. I mean, we just discussed this, some of you who may not have, who came a little later. So the question is that in a ring of fire, where we have one earthquake a week, where we have the maximum tsunamis, earthquake, volcanoes, what justifies the location of an 80,000 crore project that involves such a big transshipment port, where you want to bring in 400,000 people, which is a fragile ecology, beyond saying what we did in the earlier session that this is wrong and we should not let it happen, which I think we should not let it happen, are there other modes of engagement? And this framework is what I'm proposing. I think might be useful even if it does not answer questions. It opens up conversations, and I think it can force people to think about why is it, what is happening, kind of thing. Next one. I mean, this I've just gone through. You have this information. You have all the information you need. You have an earthquake that has happened. You have lighthouse now standing surrounded by the water, and you still think it's okay to go and construct a 70,000 crore project in this thing. What is really happening and how can we engage with this? I mean, that's really what I'm trying to do in some senses. Next. This is just that whole story of that particular project. Next. Yeah. So this is one part of the story. Now, so these are the realities in some senses of the world that we're living in. We have this climate change happening, we have the coming of the Anthropocene, we have this, in spite of all this knowledge, this huge project that is coming up, infrastructure we spoke about. So in the study of science and technology in STS, it offers us tools, like I said, and this is classic work that some of you might have read about or heard about. In the late 70s, early 80s, Bruno Latour and Steve Woolgar, a French philosopher and a British-English sociologist, did a study of a laboratory. They entered a laboratory like an anthropologist would perhaps go to a remote village. And the book was called Laboratory Life. And I will just read out from the initial part of what Bruno Latour writes about it. So the book is based on fieldwork done in Roger Gilman's laboratory at the Salk Institute. And what Latour said, and this is a methodological thing I'm trying to point to you. He says, since the turn of the century, scores of men and women have penetrated deep forests, lived in hostile climates and weathered hostility, boredom and disease in order to gather the remnants of so-called primitive societies. He's talking of anthropologists who've gone to the remote Andaman Islands, who've gone to the remote Amazon forest, or have gone deep into the forests of central India to study a tribe with exotic culture and behavior. And he says, by contrast to the frequency of these anthropological excursions, relatively few attempts have been made to penetrate the intimacy of life among tribes which are much nearer at hand. He's saying that there are people living around us whose life is far more important for us, who are doing things that influence our lives on a daily basis, but we have not studied them at all. And this is perhaps surprising in view of the reception and importance attached. There's so much importance for what they do, but we've not studied them. We refer, of course, to the tribes of scientists and to their production of science. So he actually uses the analogy of the laboratory being a black box, of something happening inside a laboratory where knowledge is created, which is important, but we don't know what happens. We don't know how knowledge is created. And what, next one please. And what Salk says in his book is also very interesting. In the same book, in his introduction, he says, scientists often have an aversion to what non-scientists have to say about science. So scientists can be poets, and they can be authors, and they can be critics, but the moment a sociologist tries to say something about science, they are willing to, you know what they are willing to do. They will simply not accept that you have the capacity to have any commentary on science. That is their exclusive domain. So what Salk is saying is that scientists often have an aversion to what non-scientists have to say. Scientific criticism by non-scientists is not practiced in the same way as literary criticism by those who are not novelists or poets. Scientists are not drawn to read what outsiders have to say about science and much prefer the view of scientists about scientific endeavors. However, the present book, which is Laboratory Life, is somewhat different from accounts usually written by non-scientists about science. It is based on a 2-year study by a young French philosopher, which was carried out in this institute. He has tried to observe scientists with the same cold and unblinking eye with which cells or hormones or chemical reactions are studied. A process which may evoke an uneasy feeling on the part of scientists who are unaccustomed to having themselves analyzed from such a vantage point. The kind of objective observation by an outsider of scientists at work, as if they were a colony of ants or of rats in a maze, could be unbearable. So, are there any scientists in the audience? No, you are not rats and ants, but you are very interesting objects of study. And I think what this offers is, it's important to keep in mind that in the paradigm that we are today, where we are talking of evidence-based policy making, where there is so much premium on evidence and science and scientific fact, the question of what is scientific fact, whose expertise is expertise, who is an expert, these are questions that are contestations of knowledge. And we are in a moment today where that contestation has also become problematic. Let's accept that, because much else is being pushed ahead under that rubric of knowledge systems. But having said that, how do we engage with a paradigm of knowledge that has become the dominant paradigm, which has led to technology which brings us to the precipice of climate change? And we have to engage with that paradigm of technology, science, and of the production. And that is what this kind of mode of engagement offers. I use this method to do a study in the nanoscience and nanotechnology laboratories of India. I spent 6 years studying 4 nanoscience, nanotechnology laboratories, and it was a revelation. It was a revelation in many, many ways. In some senses, it's about also humanizing the scientists, but also understanding what goes on. What do we know of scientists? What images do we have of scientists and how that can change? What do they do? Etc., etc., etc. It opens up possibilities of engaging with what's going on there. Next one, please. Very basic questions. For instance, how deeply embedded values are in technology. Okay, this is a very classical example of a chair. Anybody has a problem with this chair? Yeah. How many of you are left-handed in the audience? See, there might be a 2% population that is left-handed. Because they are a minority, this is something that becomes the default design. It's quite likely, or I'm 100% sure, that a left-handed person would have never designed this technology. If they had to design the chair, they would have thought about themselves at least. So there is a lot embedded within design, within technology, that by default comes and becomes the norm, because there is also a function of who is making those choices. If not an explicit exercise of power, it does become something that is default, because we operate within the framework of what we know. In the next example, this is not about Obama, this is about the speaking stand that he's talking behind. Why is a standard speaking podium 4 foot 2 inches height or whatever? It is reference to a certain set of people. The average height of Indian women is 5 feet 2 inches, if I'm not mistaken, or 5 feet 1 inch. That's about this. So this podium is not designed for an average Indian woman. I've known women, friends, who will not be seen behind this podium. So why this podium becomes, there are many hands going up there. So what I'm just trying to say, this may not be damaging, but there are a lot of examples of, for example, in the class that I teach, we talk about treatment for heart diseases for women has been based on an entirely male paradigm. Even the rat models on which those diseases were tested and the treatment was tested was actually male rat models. So it is not to ascribe intention or malintention to anybody. It's to say that there are embedded issues which we have to uncover, which we have to unpack, and here is a method which will actually take us to saying that the crises, the different kind of crises that we face today. Next one. This is a picture completely unrelated, but I found this to be a very profound, a genuinely profound exercise and experience for me about what technology is. You can see there's a projector of the kind that we're using here. It is hung from the wall. This is in an auditorium in an IIT. I won't mention which one. I don't want to get into trouble. But what you see in the picture also is something very interesting. You see a bottle of distillery water on top of the projector. And can anybody guess what? It's a fascinating story of what it is. I was sitting in this auditorium and listening to a lecture, and I suddenly noticed this bottle, and I asked this friend of mine, I said, what is this bottle doing on top? It's not like a pigeon that goes and sits everywhere where we don't want them to sit. They have agency. Somebody has gone and put the bottle over there. Now this friend told me, I put the bottle there, Pankaj. I said, why? He said, you see half the bottle has water. The angle of the projector is slightly askew. So I am putting water to align the projector so that the projection is right. And over time, the water evaporates, so I keep adding water. So genuinely, it is one of the most profound insights I've ever got. So the first thing is, it also means that an IIT cannot get a projector oriented correctly. So if we are in a situation, it's not big for it happens everywhere. But what does it say about so many things? Where we are sitting in positions of power and influence, and look at how a solution has been found. I think it's a very elegant, low cost and a perfect solution. You don't need to do anything. What's wrong with that solution? And I think that is that space of innovation, of creative alternatives that get lost out in the larger narrative of more money and the bigger technologies which we have to kind of constantly engage and kind of challenge. And that is where solutions might lie. It might not solve the problem that we are facing, but there are small ways out here and there, because many people, I think the majority of people of this country are living their lives like this. I don't have time to hear, but I've done a case study in East Midnipur of an automobile there, which some of you might know, which is called the machine van. And it's a fascinating object. How is it made? What is the cost? Who's fabricating it? I have an entire case study on that. We might dismiss it as illegal, as pollution creating, but what is going on? Why are this entire community creating these thousands of vehicles? What is the ecosystem? What is the economic ecosystem, political ecosystem in which that is needed? So I think there are lessons there. There are points of entry there to kind of engage. Next one. I hope I'm doing. Okay, I'm now going to come to what I think is a very fascinating engagement of mine. Let's just go back. I'll tell you when to move. Yeah. So, like you would enter a laboratory and want to study what's going on there to understand what's happening. So the analogy in the laboratory, and I just take a moment here to also talk about, is for example, the front stage and a backstage of a performance. We all know that a beautifully performed play, 2 days earlier we know what the mess is, and even when the play is being performed, we know what's going on backstage. Or if you turn the sociological microscope around. So those are the kind of examples that we get science as a very clean, neat, beautifully articulated, beautifully performed exercise. But a lot happens backstage that is hidden, that is written out of the process. The universality of science happens in a place that is grounded. It is very space and place based. Eventually we make it universal, but it happens in a particular context. So one is to study the process of science, the other is to study the documents that tell us about the science, that tell us about technology, that tell us about policy. And we studied one document when I was doing my postdoc, document, next one please, called the Technology Vision 2035, in which, this is a Department of Science and Technology document, I won't go into great details, but which talks about what India should be in 2035, there's a technology vision. Now this document has 6 Indians. They have visualized and categorized Indians of 2035 in 6 categories. I will show you those images of what the Department of Science and Technology has referred to as Indian citizens. Okay, next one please. This is Indian citizen number 1 of 2035. Next one. This is Indian citizen number 2 of 2035. Next one. This is Indian citizen 3 of 2035. This is the Government of India document, Technology Vision 2035, that says these are going to be the 6 types of Indians. There are many, many interesting things. Next one. This is the 4th Indian of 2035. Next one. This is the 5th Indian of 2035. And next one. This is the 6th Indian of 2035. Alright? Now each Indian of 2035 has a label. Now you will already, if you quickly go through, can you make out one thing that's very visible in these 6 images I've shown you? All Indians of 2035 are 35 years old. Most of the audience and me sitting here, probably one leg in our graves, hair suddenly gone, teeth gone. We are not there in Technology 2035. And neither is there a 10-year-old child. So you are looking very deliberately, by design or otherwise, at a certain section of population. The question is, why should that be if this is Technology Vision 2035 for the whole of India? Next one. And these are the categories that they have been mapped to. There is alternative lifestyles and worldviews. There are beehives and production lines. There are rooted and remote. There are creative, innovative, imaginative. There are globalized diaspora. They are the left out or the left behind. And now if we do a match the following that we do in school, if we do a mental match the following and see which according to you is which, or which according to the government document is which. There are many, many interesting questions to be asked. So for me, one question is, what do you mean by left behind? Left behind from what? And the moment we say you're left behind from something, you've decided that something is desirable, because that is what you don't want to be left behind from. Rooted and remote. What do you mean by creative, imaginative, innovative? Why can't all of these people be creative, imaginative and innovative? Does it have to be exclusive categories? Maybe they are not. But why do we... Any exercise of this kind is going to be problematic. But what is it that is actually happening? And why are we doing this? And what I'm pointing to, as much as what is there in the images, is a process of deconstructing and making an attempt to deconstruct a scientific process, a scientific document, because embedded in that are deep values. And it says something, it performs, as you will recognize. And why should one category be one? And you can imagine, in your mind, I think a man with a turban and the dark woman with a bindi wearing a sari and long hair, you know which two categories they represent. It's unlikely, or I mean, if anybody thinks otherwise, then I'll be very happy to hear, that that woman might be considered the globalized and the diaspora. There's an image that we have, these caricatures, these biases are deeply embedded. Next one. And this is what it is. Yes, so the woman in dark, and these are not exclusive categories. So they are also saying they are overlapping categories, so it's more than 100%. But 30%, it is that dark woman in the bindi who is the left out and the left behind. And it's the man in the turban who is the person who's rooted and remote. And the question is, why is this the way they have been categorized? Imagine the person in the helmet being 55% behind the production lines. And the text says, these are the heart of the productive processes of this country. So the farmer, farming, agriculture, fisheries, craft are not considered by extension the productive processes of the people of this country or the systems of this country. At least it's not articulated that. So I think why I'm pointing this to you, and this becomes a fascinating exercise in a technology institution like IIT Bombay. Just yesterday I was doing this class and they're absolutely flummoxed. They say, how can we do this? I said, yeah, let's ask the people who did it. And next one. So this is some categories of what is their bigger needs. So you will see that the women in left out or left behind, the bigger green ball, her biggest need is for prosperity. She has identity. Smaller the circle, she has that characteristic. So you're saying that this is a poor woman who is left out or left behind, and there is an image that has been created for her. Next one. The next. For me, some of the answers are in this image. On the left hand side top is the National Apex Committee that has kind of guided the whole thing. And some things are very obvious in that set of people, right? It's only men. It's only men of a certain age. And it's only men of a certain background. There are either technocrats or scientists or people from the scientific technology bureaucratic institutions. So a vision for a country, if it is made by a certain set of people and articulated, it's going to be this kind of thing. There's no fault really of anybody. So this also becomes a very interesting case for representation. Surely a farmer or a woman or an Adivasi or a craftsman may have a different vision. Would have a different vision. No vision is exclusively wrong or exclusively right. That's what I would come to think. And I'm beginning to think that we need to think of multiple visions for a country like this. With so much diversity, so many societies, so much language, so many ecological variations, how can we have one vision? And when a system, whether it's of policy or politics or science and technology, makes a document that is one vision, then we are running into trouble straight away. And if we engage through creative tools in interdisciplinary academics and otherwise, and ask these questions, I think we will open up possibilities of re-engaging with the challenges and what the solution might be. Because to say that this is wrong and to kind of unpack it and say why it has happened and what has happened might be a way forward in finding a solution to something of this kind. That's what I would like to kind of submit. Next one. These are just two books I've done based on, I think you got copies based on my PhD work. One is a biography of a laboratory where I spent 6 years studying the laboratory from, tells the story of its birth and then its death, and a fascinating story of how they made cutting-edge scientific instruments at the cutting edge of modern science and technology in ways that you'll be very surprised. And the other one is across the force case studies of what happens and how, for instance, this influence of society and technology, of how for instance, in one case where, in one case study where there's a young little girl with a condition of the eye called retinoblastoma, which is a cancer of the eye, and the doctor's story is that if I don't treat the eye, treat the cancer, and the child loses her eye, and I tell that to parents, parents don't come back with their children to me because they rather let that girl child die rather than have a girl child with one eye, because who will marry a girl 20 years from now with only one eye? And this doctor, who's a doctor in a eye institute, is also a scientist, and he's using nanotechnology to provide a solution. So it's a very interesting kind of configuration that kind of starts to happen. Next one. Sorry, next. Oh, sorry, next. Yeah, okay. Do we have another 15 minutes?
Yes.
We do?
Yes.
Okay, so what I'm going to do is now kind of again completely jump, and I'm going to ask Sujitha to help to go to that film. Now, I am, like I said in the beginning, I am grappling with how to kind of communicate some of these things, and one realizes that these are tools too, but also pedagogically how to engage. If you can, you have to go to your
System.
to your system. So I have been trying to do things with students which kind of engages with some of these questions in different ways. And one of the things I have done, and I think that is partly a response to some of the questions, is engage with some element of Gandhian ideas. And what I do as part of a course that I teach every semester is to put the students through a compulsory 3-day module of hand spinning on the charkha. I have learned it myself. We've had people, experts come from Pune, which is very close by, and we teach. And this is a short film where I documented this 3-day process of going through with the students of what this hand spinning workshop experience is. And what I do realize is that something that you do with hands, this embodied experience, questions of skill, of drudgery, of tradition, of labor, of capital, of pollution, 3 days of a workshop of this kind is able to raise questions more effectively than 3 months of lecturing on those things. So as a teacher, which is something I am doing very recently, how to create new tools and methods of engaging with students. And this is one of those attempts on my part so you will get a sense of what it means and what the kids learn, and we will start, but we just need to figure out the sound on that, Sujitha.
Yeah.
If you can get the mic to perhaps,
Should I bring the mic there and we can? Will that work? I hopefully it will work. Yeah. So this is that's what
your internet is.
yeah.
My name is Pankaj Seksaria, and I teach at the Center for Technology Alternatives for Rural Areas at the Indian Institute of Technology, Bombay, in India.
Can you put this light on?
Every semester, I offer a course titled Technology, Society and Development, an integral component of which is a 3-day hand-spinning workshop where students use the spinning wheel to convert cotton fiber to cotton yarn. While spinning wheel, known in Indian languages as the charkha, is an integral part of modern India's imagination, very few people have actually seen the object, leave alone having worked with it. There is also a huge discussion on the irrelevance of this technology in modern times because it is hand-driven, slow, and low on output and productivity. The attempt in the 3-day workshop is to turn this narrative of irrelevance on its head through a combination of discussion and debate, but more importantly, experiential learning and the possibility of creating tacit knowledge and understanding. What is particularly fascinating is to watch how the process of learning unfolds and what experiences and memories the students take away. The highlight, of course, is a small length, 100 to 200 meters on average of cotton yarn. Students take with them as a real, tangible output of what they have created themselves.
have to like devote your time daily to like attain a level of perfection. When I start spinning, I don't know when 1 hour passes by. So that is very different. When I am bored, I feel like wasting a lot of time, or I sometimes I give up, and sometimes I just go out and so. But this is different. This is not screen. It involved a lot of focus and patience, I think. And I got to know that my grandmother also used to do this, and maybe I think her to my mom because she knows how to spin, but she never did. Like straightforward answer is Yagni, but spending time with yourself is one thing which I learned. Like that happens when I sketch. I attended a charcoal drawing workshop, so I felt like that, like the feeling was similar. Like, yeah, like in 1.5 hours, a beginner like me can look at this much.
Like hands-on was not something that we experienced until probably we entered our architecture school. So when there are encounters like this, we are able to actually experience how we ourselves can contribute to creating something. Like you need to be in a certain sense of a rhythm with your body and what is happening. I think at an emotional level, it's actually this alienation, this response to alienation that is happening when I engage and try to like work with this. Or else, I think it's also when I'm knitting. It's the same thing. And it's very nice, it's very beautiful that we can actually use our hands and we get sort of just forgotten all of it. And so in fact I was like going to ask you later that tomorrow can I bring my daughter also?
I have been working on threads itself. This kind of was a different domain because unless you touch the cotton yourself, you are not aware how the thread is made out of. And it's still a mystery. The entire process kind of is very complicated, and you need to have the intuition to know when the thread will break or when it will not. Had it twisted inside my hand, or do I need to allow the cotton to be pulled first and then, or do I need to rotate the surface? So I think that better understanding I could see from the fabric in my hand. And as a child I would make small spots. And it has like a similar kind of understanding like when you're trying to shape the pot. So yeah, that is my memory of the hands. But it is very natural when you're working with materials like this, where there are people, but then you with your own hands are shaping them. So I think with any material when you're working with hands, it would do the same thing. I think after a point of time, your cognitive sense of what is happening, like from a purely mechanical experience, where you're just trying to understand the movements, to more cognitive experience where you now feel the concept and understand the pulling of the thread and the rotation simultaneously. I told my grandmother that for this, spinning class, and she was quite happy that such kind of thing exists in technical institutes like us. And she went back into her days when she would spin such things and then take it to the shopkeeper. And in exchange of that, the amount that she has made, she'll get an equivalent amount of cloth. And that is how the cloth used to get stitched. Every child in home would be doing it. And then since she belongs to the Pakistan side of the border, she remembered the atrocities that happened at that time when she was explaining that the weavers were, the thumbs were cut by the Britishers. So as a revolt, they started this thing where everybody would be spinning that. And taking care of. Yesterday I thought a guy competed me. Today I'm like still learning like my first day.
So when I first came to know about this spinning workshop, I did not have any idea that it's based on Gandhiri's ideologies and all, which we have studied in history, and I have seen the pictures, that's it. I have always been into academics and not like beyond that mostly. It was really difficult to actually get the yarn out of it. Like it is really a scientific process to actually measure the tension and then you need to extend it. Today, the third day, I was able to do it on my own and I felt like I was independent. Basically, it's like you need to feel the process. You need to feel the vibration in your fingertips so that you can actually get the yarn out of it properly. It's a gut feeling actually. It depends on the practice, can't express it in values. So it's just a feeling that we need to get it on our own. And like other students who were saying like their grandmothers and all, they used to do this, but I did not get any opportunity to actually see it. So maybe I will be passing on to my generation and my brother is also there, I will be telling this experience. So yeah. It is really relaxing and it's just a good feeling which everyone should have.
See, being a mechanical engineer, I could, when after I learned it, I could understand the basics of it. And this is much more relevant in today's scenario of energy crisis and climate change and so on. And most of this, being a productive art, you produce, whatever you produce, you can consume it. This way, you learn to optimize your needs and optimize your consumption pattern. But if you follow, actually when you say I am independent of my fabric, you are dependent on somebody else's as well. This interdependence is built into your independence. So farmer, spinner, weaver, dyer, tailor, all these chain. Then I must always see that whatever product I am doing for whom, he should not be in a trouble or he should be at comfort, realizing the value of our own efforts and somebody else's efforts. So all these small connections, I could make it while I was doing it. It has got medicinal value or physiotherapy value, therapeutic values, economic considerations, social considerations. a kind of a meditation. Sometimes you lose yourself totally, immerse yourself totally into it for hours. So you do it regularly. During 3 days of 4 days workshop, people learn the technique. But the discussions which go around, that stays with them for long. By working, since they have come on their own, they can understand the nitty-gritties of the process quickly. Frequency of teaching them or going to them and guiding them is much less compared to other places. Start rotating, keep pulling. Of course, first day most of them get frustrated because the yarn gets too many times and somebody else is doing, but I could not do that. So that comparison also does it. But when we say that how much is not important, how much time you enjoy doing it, that is important. Then they start shifting their focus on something else. Second day, about 80% of them can do it. Third day, 101% can do it. And third day, everybody is from within so satisfied into, you can read on their faces, so much satisfied that they could do it. And that is the real reward for us. Beyond technology is human research, and that is what much more important. So, in Silla, particularly with these people, after graduating from this place, they will go at higher places in policy making. So, for them, it is very important realizing the value of efforts and this concept of non-elimination of the human aspect in pursuit of technology. That time, when they are there to take a decision, they might realize that, oh, this is what is more important than this. That is why I feel that this kind of workshops in IIT kind of institutions are much more important than in other places. The whole crux lies into whether you really enjoy what you are doing. How much yarn you make, it doesn't matter. How much time you enjoy into it. Because this gives you a quality thinking time. Particularly in spinning, if you enjoy it, then next time nobody will have to tell you that you do it. You on your own will sit down and do it. And the Sarkar will write you.
Yeah, so doing this workshop has been a very fascinating experience to be able to raise the kind of questions that I think link up. And one lesson for me, generally speaking, is scale and speed. I think we are so much in a paradigm of bigger and faster, and technologies like this, I think, also force questions and possibilities again of the small and the slow. And in the larger context, I think that is very, very important. Otherwise, the crises that we are facing of various kinds are going to only get larger. And like I said, these conversations with, and you got some of the context from the students, what they say themselves. It's quite amazing how they respond to that experience. And that has been a very big lesson as an individual, but also as trying to teach some of these concepts to students. So I thank you very much on that, and thanks again to Khalid for this great opportunity. And if you have time, questions, but I hand it over to you, ma'am. Thank you so much.
Very interesting talk indeed. Thank you, Pankaj. And the house is open for discussion only for 15 minutes because we are running short of time. Please complete it within 15 minutes.
রেডি থাকতে হলে কি খুব স্লো
ওখানে আছে বলছি
সেট কটাই কর
Or maybe you can come ahead and still the mic is.
কর্ডলেসটা দেবেন বললেন কর্ডলেসটা দিচ্ছেন
Very nice talk. And thank you very much for this. In my opinion, we have most of the required knowledge in the form of science and technology, but we lack the sense of responsibility. Like you have talked about the concrete. So cement is a part of it, very important part of it. We need 100 grams of calcium carbonate to get 56 grams of calcium oxide, which is used to make cement. And in this process, during calcination, we blow away 44 grams of carbon dioxide to the atmosphere. Now, we can stop this carbon dioxide going into the atmosphere by reducing it to carbon, right? But that needs money, and that is why people do not want to use that, right? And we are freely blowing away carbon dioxide to the atmosphere. This is one. Second, look at that bottle of water. See, all of us are very comfortable using that water bottle. But we never give a thought to it that, say, Bisleri, say, Railmead, or any other brand, they are produced only at few places. And they are transported to various locations burning the fossil fuel, which again goes to the atmosphere. We can very well minimize or even leave behind this water bottle, but we give our comfort over our, you understand, whatever. So here, first thing is that our sense of responsibility should be prime, because we have the science and technology available to us.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think point well taken, absolutely. There's no denying that. Absolutely, sir.
Okay.
There are some contestations of what I say.
Thank you. The thing said known unknown and unknown unknown.
like you made an example like tsunami or earthquake. It is true, that is unknown. But the capital itself is engaging itself to have those unknown to know. Like they're investing money or investing capital on, the assumption of when in some places this tsunami could occur or an earthquake could occur. So actually, ultimately, it's a capital who is still overpowering every aspect of life. So it's not right at this moment. One thing can be unknown that can be known the next day or say 5 years later. So that's a very small window of opportunity. So basically my take is whatever we aspire for as for the entire Earth global system, the capital will take over. That is not my. What is your take on that?
It's difficult to disagree, but how can we find more of engagement and questioning, perhaps, whether it is so at least to be able to discuss those questions as against operating in the sense that this is a given, that it is not a given, it is constructed in some senses, and there might be ways of engaging with that. So, I mean, that's the best I can answer, because in terms of how do we calculate the value of what is there, and that also is problem, say, ecological economics and stuff like that. The idea of the precautionary principle of also looking at saying that we should actually be a one step slower, because we don't know what we will lose in the anticipation of what is in the future. So I think I'm not qualified really, I don't have the experience to be able to answer that, but I think there are ways in which people are trying to engage with that, and maybe in economics, maybe in other areas, we have to think more and work with this a lot more, but I don't have an answer to that. Perhaps there are more better qualified, educated people here themselves who might also have some answers to the question you're asking. But I think, again, very important point, and I don't know how we can fully engage with it.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Pankaj. But just mention a little bit about the Great Nicobar project. Yeah, but though that was not the topic to discuss here. But in terms of this known and unknown imbalance, do you think actually we are all concerned? I'm basically being from Anthropological Survey of India and walked with them, and I just visited them. I walked in the Champagne area, and Nicobar is in 2016. That time we didn't know that this is coming, this huge mega project. Thing is that, say, imagine we now know everything in terms of the biodiversity, in terms of the people living there, their culture. If we could know everything, would it make any difference to the protesters or to visualize the impact it's going to? I think the future, we all know who have studied or who are in this context, but this is vividly denied by the project authorities. So knowing all facts of GNI, would it be helpful for the?
No, I think the answer to that question is yes, it will make it, because that at the end of the day, there is a body of evidence that you're going to work with. It's up to us and up to others to accept that body of evidence. And then I'm thinking there are processes of adjudication who will decide what decisions are being taken, how they are being taken. I think there are formal processes and platforms, like informal, like the public opinion, like advocacy of a certain kind, and then there are administrative processes, and then there is the judicial process. Now that is a framework within which we operate, and looking beyond that also might be possibilities, but this could be at various levels. I mean, there might be a lack of knowledge, but there is also a denial that the knowledge exists, and there might be other interests. So I think what is up to us as individuals and systems is to decide where we want to intervene and how we want to intervene. Of course, there is knowledge, but a lot happens even in the presence of the knowledge. So, in some senses, my answer to your question is yes, we know, and yes, there is a denial of that knowledge, and yes, there is an ignorance and there is destiny to explain. But in the context of that, what is it that you and I can do? And that is the best that we can do in the real hope that yes, there will be a response. And I think that is going to happen in the sense that people will respond. And many people across this country and across the world have acknowledged in this particular case. In other cases may not. So I think that is, there are small windows that we can work with, small opportunities, and I think we have to do that.
Still, we are hopeful.
Absolutely.
And just to inform you, apparently no, yesterday only Calcutta High Court, there was PI.
There was a PI. There will be 2 PIs in the Calcutta High Court on that, yes.
Most of the PIs coming up in different courts. So anyhow, still we are hopeful.
Absolutely.
And because actually we know it, we are doing it very much knowing desperately.
And I might also make one point is that this knowledge thing with the students that I work with, many of them, for example, have not heard of the Anthropocene. What was amazing in this class that I am teaching when I started off, this is a class of 2nd and 3rd year undergrad students. I was shocked. I asked, do you know who was responsible for the creation of the IITs? A class of 40, not one student knew. So I think, information itself, I mean, we are assuming that there is information. But there's no point blaming anybody. But there's so much to be done depending on what is important to us. So I think telling the story of the giant leatherback turtle or telling the story of who created institutions, we are living in the assumption that we know, because we seem to think we live in an information overload kind of society and culture, but that's not necessarily true. So I think there are lots of opportunities of making the difference at various levels. Both information but also perspective. You might have the information, but what do you do with it? Or with the value system, etc., etc. So I think there's a lot to be done in that sense.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, thank you.
So when you see the climate crisis playing up in the political arena, so it starts becoming a political question.
It's always. It's a political.
So, so when do you see the climate crisis getting into the arena of politics? So it starts becoming a political question, which political parties or other socio-political bodies needs to answer.
You are asking me when that will happen?
Right. Any thoughts about it, or?
I think it's also who is the whole discussion on mitigation and adaptation and who is actually bearing the cost. So it's a deeply contested space. Climate change itself is. So I was making this presentation in one of a faculty group, and there was a faculty member from climate studies. He heard this whole thing and then said, "You said climate crisis, but where is the crisis?" So it's like, okay, it's a completely different level of discussion, and that's also how we understand the world of what is happening. But I think that has to happen, because if it becomes a question of livelihoods and livelihoods for whom, then we will realize that it is a deeply political question, and it has to become a political question. How we are going to make it to happen? The flip side of the whole thing is that it's also very conveniently used in a way that is not productive. So one is, it creates a sense of paralysis, because it's such a large problem. It is at a global scale, so what can I do as an individual? And two is, my larger concern with the climate change discussion is that it actually takes away the political question. So if there is a drought or if there is a flood, it is not just about changing climate, but it's also a statement on a lot of the policies and the failure of governance. Lakes are flooding or lands are flooding in cities not because there is more rainfall, because they are constructed on wetlands. So, but then we can, divert the question by blaming it on a climate change kind of thing and ignoring the question of the politics and the power that is actually going there. So it's a kind of complex thing that we have to deal with, and it should not become something that we fall behind as a cover. So the elite of the country, in some sense, I think, are using the Adivasi and the forest dweller and the farmer as a cover to demand for an increase of our footprint, and to say that as a country. So the whole debate of the national average and the per capita consumption and per capita. So I think that at various levels we'll have to. It has to be granular and it has to be calibrated in terms of how we do that. But clearly, I think that crisis is in front of us, and we have to constantly debate and discuss and engage with it. And I think consumption and things like that have to be at the center of the debate. You can't go on. Green electricity and all that kind of stuff, EVs and all, I don't think are the solution, because they're pushing the problem somewhere else. So consumption, emissions, these things are very fundamental, and those are very deeply political questions also.
Thank you, Pankaj, for this elaborate discussion and interesting lecture. And thank you, Prashant. So we break for tea for 15 minutes, and